are listening to the Pharmacist Answers podcast. I'm Cynthia, the pharmacist, and today you'll get your questions answered and your curiosity cured.
Part of preparation for 2016, a lot of people had to make decisions about insurance, about health insurance, prescription insurance, blah, blah, blah. And before the year ended, I did a whole Periscope, long conversation with lots of people asking questions, but went over all of the terminology, kind of the Insurance 101, the terminology that will be used in the documentation that you read, in the different types of things that you pay them for and pay other people for and things like that. I've got two tips that can help make your transition into your 2016 insurance go as smoothly as possible. Tip number one is you have to know your cards. I got 3 different envelopes before the first at the end of December, and they all had a different card inside of it. And sometimes people will get those cards and you're like, all right, some of these look the same. I don't know what of these am I supposed to do. So I'm going to show you my cards. I used a dry erase marker and blacked out my numbers. So no personal information. It's got my kids' names on it, but whatever. A lot of times, because different companies send cards out different ways, so you have to know what your cards are for and the information that's on them. So I got 3 different cards. The first card is my medical insurance card. And it will usually have information about doctor's office copays, emergency room copays, hospital stay copays. It'll have kind of like slashes. It tells me that if I go to a Walgreens clinic, my copay's $5. If I go to another, a different clinic, like a walk-in clinic, then my copay is $10. So that tells me that this is my medical information card. Other times, it'll say real big on the top, medical, and then you know that that's the card that you're that's the card you turn in at the doctor's office, that's the card you turn in at the ER, at the hospital, at a clinic, at a specialist. My particular card tells me all of the people, membership numbers, and so somewhere, though, there should be some detail to tell you, like, what exactly that card is going. Oh, here's another thing. It says health plan. And the card's not focusing because it's shiny. But it says health plan right there. So that's medical. The other card I got that looks almost identical except for the number of names listed. Like, they look the same. Very close to the same. The ID number on them is the same. But over here on the side, it says dental identification card. So my dental insurance is through the same company as my health insurance. So they linked my accounts and gave me the same number, but I have a completely different card for going to the dentist. Then there's other codes on this card that the dentist uses versus this card that doctors and clinics and stuff use. Okay? And then the third card that I got is my prescription card. And sometimes it's obvious that it's your prescription card, sometimes it's not. An easy way to find out is that right here, it says Optum RX, and RX being the little short abbreviation for prescription. That's a good tip if it has some kind of name that has RX in it. Also real big in the middle, it says prescription drug program. And then the third tip is that all of these ID numbers have RX on the beginning, meaning that those are the numbers that the pharmacy needs. So an RX bin, an RX PCN, an RX group. It doesn't matter if you know what those numbers mean or what they stand for or whatever. You just know it has RX in the front of it, and that means that's the card that you need to turn into the pharmacy. Sometimes you may have a medical card that looks like this, and then it'll have a little box. And Kaiser, oh Donna, Kaiser is such a different animal. People who live in larger metropolitan areas that can utilize Kaiser, they get it's really nice and really beneficial to them. People who live out in the boonies like me, if somehow they end up having Kaiser, it just ends up being a nightmare, because they can go to external non-Kaiser places in certain situations, but the places can only be so far away from their Kaiser hub location. So our closest Kaiser is in Atlanta. That's 2 hours away from where I live. And so if somebody in my area has Kaiser, they have to go 2 hours to Atlanta to utilize their services. And then if they're going to go to a pharmacy that's not the Kaiser internal pharmacy, then that pharmacy can only be like 10 miles away from that hub. So obviously they can't come to a pharmacy close to where they live. They have to go to a pharmacy either at the Kaiser clinic or one that's inside that radius. It's a nightmare. Kaiser is kind of like all-inclusive, kind of the same way the insurance for our military personnel works. It's kind of all-inclusive, so they have to go to a VA clinic and then they have to get their stuff from the VA place, and they can get special permissions to get stuff outside of that, but there's certain stipulations that have to be made. But for a majority of the rest of the population that has to either pick insurance through employer benefits or choose insurance through the healthcare exchange and the Obamacare, Affordable Health Care Act, whatever you care to call it, you end up with like all kinds of information that can just clog up your brain if you don't know exactly what everything means. So sometimes people will have a medical card that will look like this and it has all the same, and then it'll have a little box over here that includes all of these RX numbers, and it'll be off on the side. So that'll be the same card, but knowing which card you need to turn in where can make your life go so much smoother. Here at the beginning of the year, yesterday was the first day that I worked in 2016. I'd had several days off for the holiday. And so people saying, oh, we got new insurance, and they're turning in cards, and they're like turning in a bunch of cards, and they're like, I don't know which one of these is I need. So then that ends up taking longer, because if they hand me a medical card, I'm like, this doesn't have the information I need on it. So then I have to ask, do you have a different card that has like prescription information on it, or that says prescription insurance real big on it? And they're like, oh, I don't know. And so then I'm having to call the insurance company and be like, hey, I got this person, and they say they have insurance through you, and so I need to know what information I need to use so I can fill their prescriptions. And then sometimes companies can give me that information, sometimes they can't. Sometimes they have to give it to the member, and then the member has to write it down and then give it to me, and it's just like a whole big headache. So to make everyone's life go so much smoother when it comes to using your 2016 insurance, looking at the details on the card, knowing what each card is for. And sometimes through the health exchange, if you picked at the deadline, then you may not have your card yet. And there's certain ways that the exchange can get you your information or get you some temporary information for a pharmacy or a doctor's office to use to get you care early on in the year while they're still working on that. Because the healthcare exchange, it doesn't run super smooth in a lot of cases. But there's some loopholes to help make sure people are taken care of, that pharmacies can do and that you can do as the person making sure that you're taken care of. So that's my first tip. Know what your cards do and what they say and what they're for and who you're supposed to show them to in each situation. The second tip I have is that don't let logos on your cards lie to you. Because I work for Walgreens, and I don't say that a whole lot, and that's not like a bragging point, that's just my employer right now. I have my logo at the top, says Walgreens, real blurry. It won't focus, but it's even really tiny. So that's my employer, but sometimes that logo on there doesn't necessarily mean that that's the pharmacy that I have to go to. Because I work for them, it's easy for me to get my medicines there, so I don't have to like make a big deal about it. Some cards will have a CVS Caremark logo at the top. You're not employed by any pharmacy retail company ever, but your card may say CVS Caremark at the top. but that doesn't mean that only CVS can fill your prescriptions. And because it's really big printed on the card, and it's red and it stands out, and when you look at the card and that's like the first thing that your eyes read is CVS Caremark, people will be under the impression that only CVS can fill their prescriptions, and that's not true. The company Caremark that owns CVS also owns some other things, including mail order pharmacies, including some insurance companies. When that logo's on a card, that just means that that umbrella company runs that insurance company. But they want to trick you when people aren't paying attention and aren't using their brains. And I know people are smarter than this. They want you to think that that's the only place that you can go get your prescriptions. And if people are just oblivious enough to it and that's what they think, then that keeps the money in that company's pocket. So don't let that logo trick you into thinking that that's the only place that you can go. Sometimes it is the case. A lot of the times it's not the case. So if there's a logo on there for a particular brand, because there are some cards, when an insurance card has a logo for a particular company on there, if there's not explicit information in any literature that they send you to say what pharmacies you can use, call them and say, hey, this is the pharmacy I like using and I still want to go there. Can I still go there? Because sometimes they'll block other pharmacies out of their network, but a lot of times, like, everybody's included. They just have that big logo up there. So for people who aren't paying attention, get tricked into thinking that's the only pharmacy they can go to. So I don't want you to be lied to and thinking that, like, your choices are being taken away. Because that's one of the things that makes me the most mad when it comes to insurances. But my example is that there's a lot of cards that will have like a CVS Caremark logo on the top, and people will just automatically think that because that logo's on there, CVS is the only pharmacy they can go to. And that's a lie. Some cards will have like a Walmart logo on it, and they'll think that Walmart is the only pharmacy that they can go to. You don't need to let that trick you into feeling like you don't have a choice of where you want to get your medicines, because most of the time you can still choose and go where you want to. Again, that's one of the things that makes me the most mad, is when insurance companies or people who are only concerned about dollars and cents try to take your ability to choose where you want care. When they try to take that choice away from you and say this is the only place you can go. And it's a little different when it comes to like medical networks. So you've got providers that are in networks and hospitals and clinics that are in networks. Very rarely, other than like the Kaiser thing that me and Donna were talking about earlier, very rarely do you end up in a situation where all of your choices are taken away except one. So again, logos can lie to you, and you don't need to let them do that. You need to know or read or call and ask the questions to make sure that you still have the right to choose where you want your care. Whether it's the doctor you want to take care of you, or the hospital that you want to have procedures or care done, or pharmacies that you want to have fill your prescriptions, you should have the right to choose, and they shouldn't have to dictate that and take that away from you. So my 2 tips: know your cards, read the fine print, read the labels, to make sure you know which card to give to who, so your care isn't delayed, because that's the worst thing, for you to accidentally turn in the wrong card and then get a bill, especially from a doctor's office when their bills are usually not instantaneous, to get a bill and be like, I turned in my insurance, and they say, oh, well, that was the wrong card, and then you have to like go through and give them all this information for them to redo it while they're still thinking that you owe them money. Or 2, turning in the wrong card to the pharmacy and then not being able to get your prescriptions as fast as you might need them, especially if the only medicine you need is like when you're sick. If you take medications for a chronic disease on a regular basis, then you're probably a pro at a lot of this. But if you only need medication when it comes to acute care and acute problems that you have, then you don't want your recovery and your healing to be delayed because the cards got mixed up or you were uninformed. Because, like I said at the beginning, there's a lot of little tips and hints on your cards to know what the cards are for. So even though you look at the card and you go, oh my goodness, that's just like a lot of writing on there, being able to read the lines and say, okay, this says health, this says dental, this has RX in front of all of the numbers before it tells me what the number is. Those are the tips to know, if every code on the card has RX at the beginning of it, then that's a big, big hint that that's the card you give to your pharmacy. With all of the new things going on in 2016 and trying to hit the ground running and enact the plans that we made at the end of 2015 to make this year even better than last year was, having health hiccups and insurance hiccups can really get discouraging and put a damper on your progress and on your positivity. So that's my 2 tips for today. I'll see y'all later. Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Pharmacist Answers podcast. The pharmacy is now closed. You can post your questions and comments on our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/pharmanswerspod. Or you can email the show at pharmacistanswershere@gmail.com. You can tweet me or message me on Twitter @SinHendrix. You can find the show notes at pharmacistanswershere.wordpress.com. Pharmacist Answers broadcasts live on Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday at 9:02 a.m. Eastern Time on the Periscope app. You can follow me @SinHendrix or view in your web browser at periscope.tv/SinHendrix. See you next time on the Pharmacist Answers podcast.